Well, hello. My name is Linda Illingworth. I'm the registered dietitian at Life Wellness Institute, and today I'm your host for helping adolescents and young adults stay connected in a time of social isolation. Today's session will be presented by Dr. Shannon Sheffett, the newest physician addition to Life Wellness Institute. Dr. Sheffett brings a wealth of knowledge as both a board certified internist and also board certified pediatrician. She's a mother of four and has some great advice and insight to share. And with that, I'll let Dr. Sheffett take it from here.
Fabulous. Well, welcome. So this is my first opportunity to talk to many of you, and I appreciate that you guys took the time to log on. I'm obviously very passionate about both adolescents and younger children, but I really feel like this is an opportunity for us to really spend the time to listen to what they're going through, because none of us, as we look back through our adolescence and young adult lives, ever had to experience anything quite like this. So as you might have read in my bio, I am a mother of four. We're a blended family. I have two older daughters and two younger stepsons. We call it the Billy Bunch. And so we've been learning kind of a lot about each other through this process of isolation. And so, of course, you're looking here at a chalk I came home to from work one night, which I thought was pretty cool. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how people have been doing these kinds of things to help as a coping mechanism with this isolation. But I want to first just start about kind of open the dialogue of what do we think the impacts are going to be? Because we really don't know yet, but we can kind of assume some of the impacts that our youth may be having right now, starting with the self-learning. And so I'm talking about both, not just the younger children, but even college students that are coming back and having to try to complete their college courses from home. In a different home environment than the one that they were kind of training themselves to study in at college. So this adjustment to me is going to look at what I see in our home is different for each of our four personalities, and likely will be very different for a college versus a high school versus elementary. And so that adjustment takes us really listening to the kids with regards to the stress and the impact of that stress. And I think that most of us are well aware of the impacts of stress and cortisol release on the brain. So we're asking these kids to change the way they're learning. Home to them had been a place for homework, but many times that was a finite amount of time. And now home is going to be, say their bedroom is no longer just the room they sleep in, but it's also the room they need to focus on. A funny note to that, as we discussed last night, is each different personality studies better. Some of us study better alone, with music, without music. Some of us study better with another person next to me. And the second daughter said, it's hard for me to study in my room because my mirror is right there, which we all laughed and of course had to, jibe her a little bit. But she was saying it was just a distraction to her that she would never have thought of before. So then going on to the everyone learns differently, as we talk to our children, let's keep checking in with them. Let's keep saying, how did that Zoom go? Was it stressful? Was it hard to get on? Some of the kids have voiced that they get kind of anxious about getting on the Zoom because they're not sure what people can see. We have joked a little bit about the stories out there of parents, walking past a Zoom partially clothed or things like that. So the kids are aware that this is a bigger classroom than it used to be. It now includes their personal home. So checking in with them, is that too distracting? Is it too stressful? How can I help you? I think are good things to check in on, not just with the younger kids, but even the college kids, especially in a house like mine, where there's multiple kids, and many of you may have that. Or even this can be, same conversation can occur for our people working at home, is how distracting is that? Is it changing the way we execute? For 2 weeks, I did telemedicine from home, and that was very interesting to try to help the kids understand that door is closed, you can't come in, private conversations. But I found it more challenging than I expected. So then going to finding the balance between the self-discipline and distraction. Many of us know that some of us are better disciplined than others to work on our own. Some of us are easily distracted by different things. And that goes innately to the development of our brain. It's everything okay, Linda?
Yes.
Okay. We as humans are actually geared towards doing one thing at a time really, really well. Not that we can't multitask. And multitasking is a great thing in many instances, But we all admit when we multitask, we do all those things a little less better than if we were just focusing on it one thing at a time. And part of that really goes back to the development of our brain from the beginning. When we first heard a crack of a stick behind us, that would trigger us to think that there could be a predator. So the brain would allow us to change whatever we were doing to immediate defensive response. Well, now in this digital environment, in this digital world, we're finding that that same distraction can be the ping of our phone, could be the ring telling us that something's being dropped off by Amazon. So there's so many different distractions out there for us adults as we're working from home that our children may have the similar things. So working with them on asking what their distractions are, what are ways to mitigate or decrease that during their school hours, and reminding them, because some may be fearful or they don't want to tell you that their social media is distracting them, because then you're going to stop social media. Say, no, we just want to figure out how to decrease that distraction during your school hours. And then, of course, you can reopen those distractions when it's your free time. I put working parents on there, but I already touched on that a little bit, is that same kind of adage goes to us, is if we are trying to execute some important things at home, helping the children by setting their expectation to say, hey, I've got to get this done. I want to spend that quality time with you, because, of course, not everybody's schedule is going to match up. Some of us have work hours that don't line up with the school hours. And so that open communication may decrease some of the anxiety or even feelings of relative neglect that kids may feel if mom and dad are working and they're wanting an attention, or even college kids because they've missed you so much. They may have a couple courses and want to come spend time with you, but that doesn't necessarily fit into the needs of your work environment. So the opportunity, though, comes out of adversity. And that's why I put that chalk art up there, because I've seen some awesome stuff in our community and all throughout San Diego, and some of the worldwide things I've heard of what teens and young adults are doing in this free time they have found. Many are doing a lot of outreach, baking, sewing masks, doing things for neighbors, checking in on neighbors through aunt, grandparents, family members that might live alone by the Zoom and digital media. So those are some really cool things that we might not have seen that opportunity necessarily before. So as we talk about the adolescent brain, I liked, of course, the nerd at heart, being a physician, is I love to kind of help talk about the adolescent brain and compare it a little bit to the younger child brain and the young adult brain. I was reading something recently about how rental car agencies have it right. Because when a kid drives at 16, that doesn't mean their brain is yet fully formed as an adult brain. When they start drinking at 21, they still don't have the adult developed thought processes. But at 25, when they're allowed to rent a car, they're a lot more likely to have those fully functioning, well-oiled circuitry to make some good executive functioning decisions. But this is actually all based on science. It's not judgmental. That's why I absolutely love the adolescent and young adult population, because I want them to understand that we adults get that we recognize that we made better decisions in our late 20s than our early 20s or our teens. So as we're helping them through this very unique stage, is we want to think about that prefrontal cortex, which is where that executive suite, as we call it, or executive functioning begins. As a younger child, the pleasure center, the amygdala, kind of way back in here, behind the ears, is developing. That is the pleasure. That is the, I really like this. I want to continue this action. As we get older, it starts to develop the prefrontal cortex, which says, as much as I love TV, I've got to do my homework. I'm going to turn off the TV and do my homework later. So delayed satisfaction, delayed gratification. And it takes years to build that. And some of us never build it as good as others. And there's many reasons for that too. But as we're looking at this particular thing, we want to try to remind ourselves of that as we're looking at the different kids and what their different stresses will be during this time. The teen brain is amazing in the sense that we used to think that a lot of our brain development occurred in the school age child, 7, 8, and under. But we actually are finding there's a gene, the DCC gene, which is actually a deletion in colon cancer gene, which of course genes can have multiple different functions. But this particular gene is higher in teens. And in fact, if it's higher in teens, they've actually been able to correlate that with some increase in mental illness. But this gene also is part of the effect in a constant streamlining and pruning of brain connections. This is that executive suite formation. So as the teenagers start to realize cause and effect of their actions, it's creating that file within their brain to say, was that a good move or was that a bad? Did this help me study? Did this not help me study? But in stressful or different environmental factors can actually change this gene, which is why we think that plasticity or the ability to kind of mold the brain is so important in this age group. So if an environmental factor of stress per se is involved, we know stress is linked to cortisol. Well, cortisol can actually increase the presence of this gene, is what they're finding in mice studies. Whereas dopamine calms the expression of this gene. And what they're finding in some of the mice studies, now, of course, these are mice that were studied in social isolation well before this pandemic occurred. So we don't have human studies on social isolation. But as I was just talking to Lee about, I'm looking forward to hearing what we find out about what this kind of social isolation does for our brains so that we can be better about protecting ourselves from that risk in the future. So as the brain is doing this pruning, it is getting better at certain things, which is producing the ability to have higher executive functioning, to be better self-learners, better self-starters, better communicators, and all of those things for teens. But that's kind of the basis of where I was wanted to start with on where we're the different types of brains we're dealing with today. So now let's talk a little bit about the negative impacts, and we're going to balance out some of the positives. But the negative impacts that I'm most concerned about on social isolation for our youth and adults in general is the loneliness factor. So loneliness is a trigger to our brain. That feeling is very similar to the same feeling of hunger or thirst. It's a trigger telling a biological signal to our brain that we need to seek other humans to feel connection. Now, right now, we can't do face-to-face connections. And there have definitely been studies on face-to-face versus video interactions. And the dopamine release on a face-to-face interaction is easier. Whereas the brain has to take a little bit more processing to get that same dopamine release in a video interaction, but it still can occur. So the video interactions these days, the Zooms, the Skypes, the FaceTiming is absolutely beneficial if a child or adult or anybody is feeling lonely. But the loss of touch is not replicable in this situation, especially if you one of the studies I was looking at recently says about 23 to 28% on average of the US population lives alone. So if those people are in a situation where they're not an essential job and they're having to stay in their home for a month at a time, and some of my patients, when I'm video chatting with them, I make sure to address this if I know they live alone. They haven't touched anybody for a month. And even holding hands, as people who've done studies on why humans hold hands, it releases oxytocin, which oxytocin, the best way to describe it is the cuddle hormone. There's many different ways that oxytocin can be released in the brain, but it definitely is best represented by the way it feels to actually get a great hug. So this loss of touch is going to be an interesting thing too as we progress into society. Many of us joke, and my husband, when the first time I met him, he gave me a hug, and so we always joke, well, you're a hugger. Well, now we're in a society where we may not want to do that. And our children that are huggers by nature may feel kind of inauthentic to themselves if they can't hug people. So just something to think about. It's all this is now up in the air. We don't really know where it's going, but this is all stuff I wanted to make sure that we are looking at for ourselves and our children as we're looking at mood variabilities. We also find that the brain functions better in the presence of others. This touches a little bit on making sure your kids and talking to them about how well they study. Some of our kids are going to study well at the dinner table right next to each other. Some will study better on their own. We also find this at work. Some people will find that working from home works better for them. Some people will find that they definitely do not want to work from home all the time when this social distancing resolves. So one of the biggest things I wanted to touch base on that I'm feeling pretty passionate about our community where I live is what are the teenagers and young adults losing in having to finish their school year at home. I particularly feel a little bit of internal pain for our seniors, both college and high school. Yes, definitely some for the eighth graders and the sixth graders who also are going to be missing some of their big events. But when we all look back on our youth through the gray lens of good and bad, right? We may not want that prom picture shown because of the dress or whatever we were wearing or hairdo, but we have that fun memory to be able to laugh at ourselves. And so some of these kids have lost prom, lost graduation, lost that last CIF game. And so we want to remember that as we look at them just in their evolution as a man and a woman, and recognize that we'll never understand what that feels like. So what will that translate into them? For some of them may not care, but some of them will have some grief, some anger. And so I thought about it in a way of almost like the Kubler-Ross's stages. There are times of bargaining. Mom, can't I go out with my friends? Can't we just have a baseball practice? I've had this conversation at home. And that's the bargaining. And then some of it's the denial. I don't really think that it's as scary as it is. Then it turns to the anger and the grief, the anger that CIF was canceled, the anger that they may not have that same opportunity they could have had for that scholarship. And then the grief. I miss my friends. I miss the excitement of somebody asking me out to prom. All those things we want to kind of register for those particular kids, and even the eighth graders that have lost their trips to Washington, D.C., or the sixth graders who can't go to sixth grade camp. And then the college students, I can't even begin to imagine what it feels like to know that they're going to end their college career after so much work from home. I know that graduations will somehow still resume, but it'll still be different. And so I think recognizing that is important in a stage of seeing and hearing our children, or our nephews or our nieces or anybody that really this applies to. And then of the last negative impact, and this is I'm going to touch on because we all kind of know about the screen time use, is the different things that we're going to see with screen time use. I guess I should have done this as a slideshow, but I didn't. So weight gain and obesity, we all want to be cognizant. There's lots of jokes out there of quarantine Barbie, what she looked like before and after, which are funny, but at the same time, very real for many of us. We don't get to have our gym experiences. We don't get to hike or paddleboard or surf or play our sports. So keeping that in mind for the whole family is going to be important. And I've got some ideas for us later to do that. Cyber texting and bullying with that increased screen time. And now we have different portals because you have Google Classrooms, Google Hangout, Zoom, Skype. You have no way of knowing what all these kids are saying. And some of them are coming from a place of pain. Some of these kids are really experiencing the anxiety and depression and loneliness, which are two of the other bubbles there. And so that could manifest in them saying things that might harm another child or at least spiritually harm them. So checking in with our kids on how are things going and what kind of experiences they're having if they'll open up to us. Sleep disorder is important because it's throwing off the sleep schedule. My 15-year-old last night came in and she was knock, 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 11 o'clock. Hi. She was supposed to have been in bed 2 hours before. And I said, what have you been doing? And she says, I've been thinking about New York City. And so she just needed to talk about it. Which didn't fit my need, which was to be asleep so that I could be up in the morning. But I needed to realize that that was her needed time. But it's very cognizant that some people are getting some pretty decent sleep dysregulation from the increase in screen time. Blue lights are known to change the way we secrete melatonin from the pineal gland, very similar to seasonal affective disorder for people who live in Alaska or places where they're not exposed to that UV sunlight. So we want to try to remind our children that if they're on screens all day long for school, we really need to be mitigating or minimizing the screen time use. Puzzles, art, family game nights, anything that we can do to increase their access to screen-free time would be awesome. And it also is going to benefit us as well. Addiction. Unfortunately, in certain grades, these increased screen time use could manifest in maladaptive screen use. So this is where you might want to be checking some of your teen, preteen, anybody who's got access to screens. How many times are they checking it? Sometimes the phone will tell us how many times it's actually been picked up. What's the texting pattern that you're seeing? Are they just texting every 5 seconds, hey, hi, how are you, to check in on their friends when they should be doing something else? That's a sign that their brain is seeking some other form of dopamine release because they're struggling with concentration. So those are just some things to kind of think about. Video gaming syndrome kind of falls into this. Some kids very much find a pleasure in gaming and in that dopamine surge that occurs through some of these games. And if we're not cognizant of them being at this level of dopamine for 1 to 2 hours while they're playing that game, and then as soon as you take that game away, they're going to feel an obvious withdrawal that could manifest into irritability, anger, fighting with their siblings, fighting with us, unwillingness to do chores. And one of the techniques I've always used before, because I've been very passionate about screen time for a while for the kids, is if their mood changes after a movie or video game time or social media time, then a sticker or a post-it note goes back on that device of earn me back. And the goal is to get them to understand that they need to figure out how to not allow it to affect their mood and affect the others around them, especially in a situation where we have six isolated in one home. But even in general, as I try to get the kids to understand, if they're feeling anxious, sad, depressed, don't let it, that ripple effect shouldn't harm us. It may rock our boat a little bit, but it shouldn't flip our boats over. So if it's so strong that they're flipping our boats over, then we need to look at the trigger. And that's where they have the earn me back discussion at home. Computer vision syndrome, been a lot of questions in my office for the parents is, should we be getting blue light glasses? I did some research on this, and right now the American Academy of Ophthalmology is not recommending them based on evidence. I'm saying that basically they don't have enough evidence to say that they're worth the investment, but they don't find any risk to them. And they do know that filters for the front of our computers do help decrease that blue light effects. And again, that goes back into sleep disorder. So to me, if it's not harmful for you to invest in some of those, it's not a bad idea. You could also just get a screen filter for blue light for the computer, so you don't have to do the glasses. For school performance is kind of obvious. We obviously all need to be a little bit more online with the teachers, trying to help them. If we see grades are sliding, check in with the teachers. Right now, a lot of the teachers are struggling, and there's a great deal of stress on that side. So check with the kids first, and then the teacher. And if you find that there seems to be some discordance in communication, a lot of times it has something to do with the kid didn't read an email completely because they're not used to that. It's again going back to that. We're asking kids of very different ages to be very forward-thinking and disciplined in reading every line of every email in order to know what the expectations are. So it's overwhelming for many of these kids. And what are some of the positive effects? To me, what's exciting about this is the resiliency that we're going to be seeing in these kids. None of us have ever had to experience this kind of thing. So in many ways, they are learning how to be their own teacher. They are guiding themselves. They'll be better in college now, in my theory, because they're self-starting already, starting in whatever grade they are right now. They'll remember this. And if we remind them, and if we show them that as a positive, that's something that can maybe uplift their spirits a little bit when they're feeling down, frustrated. The opportunity to help others is kind of what I mentioned before. Encourage them to look at all the different opportunities. Most high school kids are in some type of community service program like Lions Heart, National Charity League, etc. But even the younger kids can be part of those opportunities with their older siblings, or even if you just want to seek them out. There's so much that they can build up their own dopamine levels just from helping another person. Identifying which kids benefit from self-learning platforms. There are so many schools now, many of the charter schools and things are looking at how, and that's where Common Core is come from, in how different brains learn differently. And we see the benefits of that. It's challenging as a parent to do Common Core because we may have learned differently and therefore don't know exactly how to translate these Common Core lessons for our children, which will be frustrating. But we may find that some of our kids do amazingly well with online classes and do better than they may have in uh, um, classroom environments. So just something to kind of keep a curious eye on with our kids. One of my most favorite things that I think we're getting out of this is the family unit. Many of us get annoyed and frustrated, but sometimes we are finding ourselves laughing, playing games, building a puzzle, things we would have never had time for before. And so reminding kids of that opportunity. I know when I was home on quarantine, uh, part of me was frustrated because as a doctor, I'm out there. I want to be with those patients and help them, but I could help them just as much through the video and then be able to have lunch with my kids. And that was a gift I'll never have again, for especially for these ages. So reminding ourselves when we're feeling stressed, especially economically, and what's the future going to look like, and all of these things, to cherish those little moments is pretty awesome. The home projects, I mean, we have built so many different things at our house in the last couple of weeks because it's a good way to keep us busy. But it's also kind of fun to help the kids understand that they can design how to build a desk and see which kids are an engineer. I came home the other day and they literally had built a swing by themselves. I had to clarify which of the four kids, the 9-year-old or the 12-year-old, had the drill in their hand. But it's pretty awesome to see things about my own children that I had no idea that they were capable of doing. And of course, there's lots of jokes right now that this is the best time ever for our pets. But it also is good for our development of music taste, walks. We are alternating family screen time for the TV on what people want to watch to diversify all of our experiences because many of us have different tastes in what we want to watch on TV. So just some wonderful things that can have come out of this. So what can we do to maintain that positivity in what appears to be a very negative experience? I'm always glass half full, silver lining type of a personality, which can be annoying to some, but also to me, it just helps me understand how to get through some of these things. Keeping a daytime schedule, I think, is key for many of us. Being the only person leaving the house, I definitely see that. I have to be on the schedule so that I can get up and out of the house and be ready to be at the office and be present and available and receptive. And so if my schedule is too far off, I'm not getting sleep, then that impacts many people. And for the kids, I've noticed when their schedules are off, they struggle a little bit with a quick abrupt, oh wait, I've got a Zoom meeting at 8:30, but I woke up at 8:15 when they used to wake up at 6:45. So those are things that we try to encourage the kids to do themselves by setting alarms and things like that. But also, of course, we have to be a part of that to help control them, getting them to understand that having school time hours and then dedicated free time hours is going to be helpful so that they can remind themselves that this isn't just a 4-month summer vacation, that it is actually still a time of active learning. And what I've tried to help encourage and for all of ours at home and is just to have the desire to make themselves better, that this is their opportunity to be their own teacher. Is they may go to school and passively learn, but they can actually take on that role of making themselves better each year. And this is the perfect opportunity for them to see the benefit of that. If they only put in a little, they're only going to get out a little. And it is pretty easy work right now, at least from what I'm seeing. It may get a little bit more complex for them in the next few weeks, but I ask them to do any of those optional activities, not just because they can, but because it's what will make them better as a human being. And they're the only ones responsible for that. And so that helps them kind of take that on themselves without me having to be over them. Creativity, this goes into art, that chalk that I showed you in the beginning. It's absolutely wonderful what I'm seeing in our communities. And I loved one chalk recently that I saw that was a picture of an egg frying on the sidewalk that they'd drawn with chalk, and it said, "Keep your sunny side up." And I thought that was pretty awesome. Diet, obviously eating healthy and scheduling meal times. Snacking is a big issue when you're home. Most of us are real close to that kitchen. So some adults, my husband actually told me about this, are packing themselves and their children lunch. And so they can only access that bag or that box, so that it keeps them from over snacking, snacking needlessly, or obviously choosing a less healthy snack option. Exercise. Some ideas that we have from our house is my husband and I used to do Spartans, and are missing it very much. So Spartan and Ironman and all of those types of many different types of gyms in San Diego, F45, Fitness Quest, all have online virtual workouts, and they're awesome. And the kids can do them with us. And it was pretty fun yesterday watching or hearing the two that had done it for their PE time, and how they were competing with each other. So if you guys have access to those kinds of areas in your home that you can do, in at least the Spartan one, there's a run involved, which you can do if that's applicable in your area, but everything else didn't need anything other than maybe something to do dips, and dips can even be done on the ground. So it can be done for any home, even if you don't have access to the gym at the particular location you're at. Stress relief. We all have different versions of ways to kind of become one and take a moment to just take all this in. Meditation, prayer, stretching, yoga, puzzles, art, even the TV time is a way to relieve that stress, bring those dopamine levels back to a nice balance, and then get back to the nice sleep hygiene, which I've touched on a couple times. So this is kind of a brief thing that I love to throw together to help families. I know we're all in this together. I'm very curious to see what the next few weeks bring, and especially the next few months as we open up our world again. The governor is talking and trying to help us set the expectations for ourselves and our children of what a restaurant might look like a month or two from now. And I think that we're going to see something, and this is where I want to bring this in the very last, as that Kubler-Ross stages, there's a new stage that I'm a little bit concerned about, that as I talk to patients and their experience with this isolation, as they talk about going back to work, is paranoia is a strong term, but an increased awareness of risk. And that's almost its own stage of grief. It's almost its own, it's going to be so different for us, because we're all going to want that same time where we, did a race and grabbed a water cup, where we had community events or parties with friends that we didn't have to look or screen for hand sanitizer or wonder if we should be wearing a mask. I don't know how long this impact is going to last. I know that we need to continue good hygiene and social distancing to prevent this virus from returning, and we do know that it has that capability of coming back. So working together as a community, as a family, as LWI for you, and helping translate all the information as it comes into us is going to be helpful in resetting our expectation for what it feels like to go back out into the communities. It's real easy to go on a hike in the future, but things like movie theaters, restaurants, laser tag, all the things that maybe some of these kids use for stress relief, even the beach and using public bathrooms, is going to be something we need to rework, but we can do it. And my hope is that we can do it in a fashion that won't have long-lasting impacts, because someday we'll all be staring back out at beach scenes like this, and this will be a distant memory that we can look back on. But we're all in this together. And thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys today. And
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sheffett. This was great information. And we have a couple minutes we could take some questions, but Zoom will cut us off. So if you'd also like to email your questions to me, I can make sure they get to Dr. Sheffett and we get all those answered for you. But Dr. Sheffett, you want to take a couple questions now? I can unmute.
absolutely.
All right, let me see if I can get people unmuted here quickly. All right. Unmute all. All right. Anyone have a question?
Hey, this is Lee. Can you hear me?
Hey, Lee.
Rich, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Rich used to be the head of all the YMCA's in San Diego, where everybody's active. How many members in the YMCA?
Oh gosh, close to 500,000.
What's your take on the impact of this and all the people that can't go to the Y now and can't exercise and be in groups like they normally do?
Well, I could just tell you the impact it's had on me. It's quite an adjustment when you're used to going to the gym every day. And what I didn't realize, it was as much psychological as physiological. Like just getting out of the house, driving to the gym, seeing familiar faces, getting your workout, and then leaving. It's not the same doing it at home by yourself, but it's important to do.
Yeah. Shannon, how do you think about that with all the kids missing PE and all that in school and teams and sports and so forth? How do you see that?
Yeah, I didn't touch on it, but it's, a little competition goes a long way. I've got the benefit of 4 at home that compete against each other, so that helps. But in kids that maybe don't have that access, a lot of times in PE, you're running a little faster because your friends in front of you or behind you. And when you're at the gym, you're going to do that extra 5 minutes just because you want to get to the 20 limit that you're supposed to be on or whatever. There's always just a little bit of a self-competition, but when you have people around you, which is interesting because one of the fun articles I was looking at from University of Virginia talked about the brain bandwidth and how it increases in the presence of others, in the actual physical presence of others. And so you can equate that to studying and doing better with studying, doing better with working. Certain brains definitely exercise better in the presence of others. That's why some of us do enjoy the gym more than a home workout. And I bet you many people are struggling with maintaining that same pleasure that they get from the same workout, but in a gym as opposed to home.
Makes sense.
Hey, Shannon, thank you for the talk here. This was really informative. One question I had or just observation is like, if you look at the kids before this, we're always like really looking at screen time. And one of the things I see is that, they want to do like, I'm seeing like the FaceTime, more, right? And they want to connect with their friends on video. What are your recommendations there? Do we give more latitude now, and what's the right balance of that? Because as we want to connect with people in some way, and video is not as good, but we're doing a whole lot more video now, everybody.
That's a really good question. And in fact, even before all this, when I did a lot of research for screen time talk for adolescents and kids in general, is that face-to-face, that co-engaged screen time is actually kind of a different realm, because the way it still does secrete the dopamine and it still is a positive interaction for the brain, that it really isn't going to manifest in the negative effects of screen time as a passive, as a scrolling. Candy Crush is a great example that keeps you locked onto it because you're just doing a repetitive kind of dopamine feeding motion. With that interactive screen time, other than maybe the eye impact and headaches and things like that I would look for, I think that kind of thing is very important. And we had this discussion last night, even in our home, because I'm pretty strict on social media, but I am getting concerned that specifically certain kids of ours are driven by social interaction, as others are more driven by internal cues. And if I limit too much of that social interaction in this time of isolation, could I potentially increase depression and anxiety? I don't know that for sure, but I do know that there's a risk there for sure. So those social type things I think are key. I'm encouraging them to use Zoom and FaceTime because to me it's a little bit more real time than say a public platform that other people can see that they don't know. So personally, I think that right now we should loosen those restrictions and just keep an eye on things like how much time straight are they spending? Are they spending enough time with their parents and other people that are actually in the room? And asking if it's causing headaches. Is it hard for them to concentrate on school, et cetera? But otherwise, I would definitely increase that.
This is Rich. There's a kids messenger app that the parent has to approve and has to approve the friends who go on it, and the parent can monitor it some. and also give the kids a little more freedom.
Mhm. I think those are going to increase our connectivity right now and hopefully decrease the depression and anxiety, because one of the things I didn't touch on because I didn't want to be too much of a downer, but there are some mice studies that have shown social isolation for a period of 3 weeks, and healthy, non-predisposed mice, meaning came from a lineage that didn't have depressive-like actions, they did fine when they re-entered a normal environment. They studied a line of mice that did have depressive-like features in their lineage, and these mice did not go back to normal behaviors. When put in water, they would not swim. And this actually lasted until from the adolescent stage of that mouse to their adult stage. So these were lasting manifestations. So I think, and as I was mentioning to Lee earlier, I think we're going to learn a lot about the human brain with the impact of isolation in the coming years. But for us as advocates for young adults, and ourselves included, the more we can open up the dialogue, keep them connected, keep them spiritually fulfilled in whatever mechanism we can right now, is going to be important.
How important is it for the kids to be, and all of us, to be spending if we have the opportunity to be spending a certain amount of time outside, getting the sunlight and just being outdoors?
As much as we possibly can. I tell all my patients, if you have a yard, go take your work outside if you can. If it's the free, like for kids, if it's their homework time, I ask them to try to do it outside. There's so many obvious benefits of sunlight, but also fresh air, of not feeling cooped up. So absolutely. And walks. I mean, if we can go on walks, we just have to avoid other humans, which there are certain times in my community, which normally you only see 1 or 2 people walking and running. It looks like New York City right now. There's so many people out for walks. So you have to zigzag around them, but it's still very, very effective.
Thank you, Shannon.
Absolutely.
Well, any last question? We're getting close to the end of our time.
This has been wonderful, Shannon. Thank you so much.
Hi, Mary. Good to see you.
Megan, it's wonderful to see you. I'd love to have you do sessions too.
I know, it's great to see Megan's face. We miss her.
Yeah,
Miss
terribly.
everybody at the office.
Something that I can
Fine.
say in regards to kind of your workouts and stuff, and I know it stinks that we can't go to the gym and everything, but what you can also think of this as is a way to potentially spend time on things when it comes to your fitness that you don't necessarily give or spend time with when you are in the gym. Everybody knows I'm a big stressor of the mobility flexibility stuff. So what you can do is you can think of it as using it some extended time that you can focus on those things that you necessarily don't focus on when you're in the gym, whether it be that stretching routine or foam rolling or whatever it may be. So then when you do, and we do finally get out of all of this, you guys can go back into the gyms, back to your workouts, moving much better. You can pick right back into it, and you don't have to worry about, oh, I haven't done anything for a few months, and then you try and go right back into that workout and then you injure yourself. So kind of use this as a time to potentially focus on things you necessarily don't focus on when you're able to go to the gym or you're in your normal workout routine, going to classes or whatever that may be. So that's my little piece when it comes to kind of workouts and getting the kids involved and stuff like that. I mean, simple games of just skipping or crawling or running. I mean, make an obstacle course and things like that. So many, you guys can do like carries and stuff like that, like, get the kids on your back or something like that. I don't know. Lots of fun. And that's what I do. Recommend to everyone with kids is obstacle course. They can be so much fun. I mean, you can have them go zigzag, you can go backwards, you can crawl, you can roll, you can jump over things, you can go up, climb over and everything like that. So lots of fun ways. And Linda also should be, if she doesn't put it up here, she'll put it in our next newsletter. I made another poster on creative ways to move more. So i.e. something like this, if you're watching a podcast or you're watching a Zoom video, you know, easy, you know, I was doing some mobility exercises, but just different ways you can move more. You know, if you're going up the stairs to take the laundry, maybe do a couple laps on the stairs, or do some lunges as you're, you know, loading from the washing machine to the dryer. You can do a side lunge. But Linda will make sure to get that out to you guys. Just some interesting ways that you guys can kind of work in those little bit of extra movements. Yeah. So, but it's really good to see all of your guys' faces.
Yeah, and I will say that Megan has some great mobility exercises, and she's videotaped them. They're super easy to follow, and I'll send those out in a link because they're a great place to start. Like she was saying, all the unsexy things that you don't do in the gym that we do need to do more of. And unfortunately, we are up to our last minute. So we're up to our last minute. Ken, did you want to say something
Ken
quickly?
should give us some words of
Yes,
wisdom.
Yes, Ken will close us out.
yeah, what I was going to say is that now that I've been secluded and all, I decided I don't want to retire because this seems like too much retirement. So I don't want it. So I'm anxious to get back to work.
Linda, is there a way of sharing Shannon's presentation with us so
Yes,
we could
there
share it
is.
with others?
I've recorded it, and God willing, I'll be able to get that out to all of you. I'm a bit of a newbie at Zoom, but I'll do my best to get it to you all.
Thank you.
All right. I
Thanks,
love you
Shannon.
all and miss you
Good.
all. And we'll meet you at the next Zoom. And Shannon, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you, Shannon.
Oh,
Thank
so
you.
nice. Thank you
Thank
for the
you, Shannon.
opportunity.
Good to see
Stay
you.
safe, everybody.
Great
Bye-bye.
to see everybody.
Bye.